Hello and welcome back to the show. So I'm really excited about my guest today, Caleb Christopher, because Caleb is the founder of Creative TC and Creative Title Company, and he is an expert in consulting and helping investors with creative financing. So I think recently a lot of investors and even a lot of real estate agents have been looking into creative financing options. So I think today's episode is going to be very valuable to anybody out there who is interested in this topic and really educational as well. So, Caleb, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So before we get into kind of today's show and the gist of it, would you mind just taking some time here and sharing a little bit about yourself and your background? How did you get started with what you're doing today, and what is it that kind of drove you to where you are here at this point?
Honestly, I started what wasn't there for me. I got started into real estate investing, did a flip house, found about creative finance, and I live outside the box. I don't just think outside the box. And so creative finance was my niche. I really wanted to learn more and do more of that. And I got into doing creative finance real estate, which is relatively complex, which is very engaging for me. But there wasn't a lot of guidance. There was guidance, lots of guidance on how to get into a deal, like get one under contract. But once you have a signed contract, not much guidance after that. Like, is the title company supposed to do everything for you? What additional paperwork do you need? How does real life work other than what you said on the phone? And so that wasn't there for me. And so I'm like, fine, I'm going to build a company to do this because I'm interested in doing it, but I think it should be safe, legal, and ethical. And I'm happy to be the poster child of that. I'll build a soapbox and stand on it and tell people how they should be doing stuff. So that's how I got into the creative real estate space. And so I started a consulting firm. That's Creative TC. And then I wanted to start a title company for a long time. But entrepreneur life, you have to be able to delegate. And that took a while for me to figure out because I didn't want to abdicate. And so I got my management team in place, and that freed me up to go start the title company, which is a recent development.
Yeah, absolutely. So you found an issue that pretty much you were struggling with as an investor, and you were able to go in and build something to help solve that problem. So we were interviewing quite a few people who recently had similar situations like that, where their business is basically an issue that they had, and their business is a problem coming in and solving that problem as well. So talk to us a little bit about the challenges of creative financing. So I know a lot of investors have been looking into creative financing
Right.
even before like recently. So what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with getting into a creative finance deal or situation?
Creative finance is weird. You don't start with creative finance, right? For a buyer or a seller or an agent, you don't start with creative finance. It's a response to a problem, and that's the way it should be. And I tell investors that too. So you've got investors who are like, if all you've got's a tool, everything looks a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if all they've learned and all they want to do is creative, then that's what they end up pushing on people. And so the challenges of creative are misalignment with what's the right type of deal for a buyer or seller, particularly sellers. So let me define creative finance. How about that? Non-institutional funding, right? A property, we're talking about a real estate transaction, typically residential, where the buyer is financed through seller financing or taking over the seller's existing loan payment or a combination thereof. Usually that's the way it goes. There's 20 different formats to do that, but it's basically we're not bringing in a new bank loan, a new hard money loan, maybe a private lender for short term, but yeah, that's how I'd put it.
Yeah, so basically being able to go in without having kind of like outside lending and still being able to get into a real estate transaction. So when it comes to going through a transaction like that, usually for investors, I know some investors start out, with hard money. A lot of investors also use private money as well.
Mhm.
Where are you finding that, kind of some of the disconnects between using more of the quote unquote traditional ways of getting financing into a real estate transaction versus going into creative financing? What are some things that maybe investors miss that maybe they're used to with traditional financing that they're, finding that they're not going to be used to using a creative finance solution?
I think one of the big gotchas, I know one of the big gotchas is that the power of creative finance is I can get into five properties for $20,000 a piece instead of one property for $100,000 upfront. That's the difference between creative and traditional. However, there aren't checks and balances unless imposed by the seller or the seller's agent. There aren't checks and balances to make sure that the buyer actually has enough funds to carry the costs for 6 months, things like that. So the qualification for a loan is number one, prove that you've got enough cash and if you have enough cash for a down payment, that tells us that you've been reasonably responsible over the last 6, 12, 18 months. That's a good factor for borrower credibility. So number one, you have to have some cash for a down payment. Number two, you need cash reserves on top of that. That's how you qualify for a traditional loan. None of that qualification criteria exists on the creative finance side. You're just doing stuff, right? And I'm cool with just doing stuff, but I was the guy in high school who's like, yeah, let's do crazy stuff, but let's put a helmet and some knee pads on maybe before we go sliding behind a car or jumping off of something. And so creative finance, I don't want to say it's like jumping off a cliff, but creative finance is weird stuff. You need to put a helmet on and it needs to be safe, legal, and ethical. And that's what I care about. So qualifying people, coaching them through making sure, hey, it's cool to do a deal with $0 out of pocket. It is not cool to do a deal with $0 in your pocket. You need cash reserves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of investors are running into similar situations, right? Where they're not familiar with creative financing,
Yep.
but they're seeing that it's something that works and they
Yeah.
jump into a deal with maybe like one situation or another and then they kind of get caught, right? Are you seeing some of that with people that you worked with, or maybe they were doing that before and then they want to continue doing it and they come to you?
Yeah, particularly people who didn't work with me. A shameless plug. I, I get a lot of first-time creative investors, people who've been in the game for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're like, creative is new. There's a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts. Am I doing it right? What am I not realizing? These are my favorite customers, the ones that come in and say, what am I not asking that I should? What's going to get me that I wasn't, that I'm not aware of? Is the deal structured appropriately? And so that's the consulting side. That's the first company that I started, was to consult and say, well, is your long-term plan to hold this? Or are you going to sell it to another buyer? Is it a rental? Are you going to refinance it soon? What state is it in? Are you bringing in a private lender? Like, are you okay with negative cash flow? Do you have cash reserves? All these things are relevant conversation points that most people I run into have not thought through all of them. And it's a lot of cascading dependencies. If this, then recheck all these other things.
Yep, exactly. So you mentioned also, having cash reserves is one of the first things that you absolutely need to have when it comes to putting together a creative finance deal, right? That's maybe like the most important thing you would say an investor needs to have. Now, what are some other things that you would say an investor should be, prepared for when going into a creative finance situation? What are some common things that an investor needs to not necessarily check off of a list, but basically start thinking about, okay, do I have these things in place? If I don't, should I maybe wait or put these things in place first before jumping in?
Excellent question. You're asking the same questions I think are my favorite questions from from good clients. Um, it's going to be realizing that sometimes the best deal is not to do the deal. And if the seller doesn't fully understand the transaction and doesn't understand the long-term nature, not just the immediate solution, hey, yeah, I'm going to talk sub two, right? You're
Yeah,
buying my house sub two. If you've convinced me to let you buy my house subject to the existing loan, my loan stays in place, you get the deed. Okay. My credit stays on the line. If you don't make payments, it's bad for my credit. If you default on the loan in any other fashion, it could result in a foreclosure on the house, but also my credit, not yours. So understanding that coming in, uh, making sure that the seller understands those implications. Yes, you can have a sub to addendum and just add it to the contract, but actually talking through it. And so, as an investor buyer, I want you to understand that sometimes 10 days from closing, the seller realizes, or you realize that the seller doesn't fully understand, and you need to rehash that conversation. It's the Sandler submarine. We got to go back to the first compartment, make sure we've locked this down before we can close the bulkhead and move to the next section of that submarine. And sometimes that means you walk away from a deal because I'm telling you, it is not worth having an antagonistic seller for the next 5, 10, 15 years. It's not worth it. Skip the deal.
yeah. That's great advice, I think, because a lot of investors they understand subject to, or maybe some investors who,
Well enough.
right,
They
yeah,
understand the opportunity, and so that's why it's hard for them to let it go. But that's something I really want everybody to understand coming into it. And for the agents watching, I want you to understand that most investors are not thinking this way. And so if you're getting sub two offers, I have free 15-minute calls to help you because that wasn't there for me. Evaluate the offer before you accept it because if you're on the seller side and you sign a contract, you are legally bound. You cannot escape unless you write in some escape clauses. Check your buyer's credit. Check their reserves, you know?
yep, exactly. And I think that's the next thing I wanted to ask you, which is, for a real estate agent out there, they're working with a lot of investors, or some agents are want to,
Yeah.
why is it important for them to also learn about creative financing? And also from an agent's perspective, what are some of the basic foundational knowledge that they need to know in order to be able to serve their clients the best?
Yeah, and some of the agents don't want to work with these, and that makes sense too. I leave a fair carve out for agents who object because I don't understand this well enough and I don't have time to understand it well enough. I'm going to recommend to my seller that they don't do this. That's a safe position. I get it. I'm not going to be angry at you for doing that. There's a lot of investors who are like, they don't even consider my offer. It's the best offer. Well, they don't have time to actually understand that. They have to through a course to figure that out. Um, I wrote this down. This is my notes for an outline for creative finance intro for agents. So I wrote that down just the other day, and it's pretty relevant. Um, I would say for agents, you need to understand that there's a story behind every deal. People don't just do creative just because. There needs to be a reason. Usually that reason is financial distress, can't make my payments anymore, and my credit is getting damaged. So you can do short sale. You're trying to avoid an auction, a foreclosure, but a credible investor can come in and make a payment up front and make payments over time and take care of that seller's credit. That can be a really good thing. An open mortgage with good payment history is very good for somebody's credit. That's something you need to understand as what's the opportunity here. However, it is imperative if you're on the seller side that you insert those escape clauses like I said. What they are specifically, that depends on you and your deal and your seller. Give my people a call for that. Um, so the right to cancel for the seller. Um, hmm. Understanding the buyer's long-term plans with the property. That's going to affect how the deal gets structured as well. Are they going to turn it into a rental? Are they actually the buyer? Most of the people slinging offers are going to be wholesalers. So if you qualify the wholesaler, but they're allowed to assign it, you didn't do anything because they assigned it to somebody else who you didn't look at their credit. So having that escape clause in to assess the end buyer um, and understanding that creative deals are complex and sometimes they take a longer time to get finished. That's pretty
Yeah.
important.
Yep. I think it's one thing that an agent can add to their repertoire of tools and understanding that will allow them to serve more clients, and also as a listing agent, right, allow you to be able to serve your clients better. It doesn't mean you always have to suggest it as the number one
Right.
solution, but having that in your back pocket, knowing that it is a potential solution, understanding it enough where you're not just kind of brushing it off the table, seeing that it's something that you just don't understand, but being able to at least intelligently present it to your seller, or as a buyer's agent representing your investor, able to intelligently and explain it to the other party, I think is very important to help you put together more deals and also build better relationships with your future clients as well.
And on the agent side, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I know a guy. I have an expert, right? So to be able to intelligently explain it sometimes means bringing in a third party who does understand it, who can explain it before you get locked in. I think actually the value of an agent other than the basic industry knowledge you're supposed to already have, is the Rolodex of vetted professionals that you have, right? I've got a foundation guy, I've got a roofing guy, I've got a siding guy, I've got an interior designer. Having those connections, having them vetted is a core component of your value proposition to buyers and sellers. And so having a creative finance guy is a part of you doing a really good job and presenting value to your customers.
Yeah.
Uh, the number one thing I tell, by the way, to investor buyers I want them all to understand this. You disqualify aggressively before you go creative. So I want you to make a cash offer. I want you to ask why the realtor route didn't work, if it hasn't so far, or why they insist on not using a realtor, whatever the seller's reason is. And then why don't you keep the property? After you get this is part of you understanding the story of the seller so that you can actually make a real deal that is practical for all parties involved. Because if a cash offer works, do that. Your hands up. You don't have a long-term relationship with this person now. And the cash offer is always at a discount. So take the discount up front. Now, in a low equity situation, which is most of these sub twos, there's not much room for a discount because that's less than what's owed on the loan. So that's okay. You still need to make the cash offer where it would be and to let them reject it. Then talk through the realtor route. And maybe the realtor route is, you know what? Normal MLS sales aren't working, but to hit our price, we'll sell to you if you're taking over payments. That's how I picked up a house in Colorado. I walked into just taking over their payments with no cash to seller. It was worth what was owed, and that's it.
Yeah, I like that because as an investor, right, you can go in there and you could just start presenting a creative finance option right off the bat without an understanding of the story. And then you can get yourself in hot water and maybe get yourself in situations where it's just not necessary for you to get in, right? Maybe they want to take the cash offer instead.
Right.
Maybe that works better for everybody. But you just came in with creative financing right off the bat, and maybe that's not the best situation. So it's all about understanding what the seller needs and then also what you can offer. It's like putting together a puzzle almost,
Yep.
right? Like what is it that you offer? What is it that they need? And do they fit for both sides? Would you say that's kind of the case as well?
Yes, and plenty of people start with a creative offer to see if they're even open to the discussion. But
Mm,
if I use that as my door opener, I would still go back and disqualify the other. Hey, it's great that you're interested in doing this, but I want to show you that I care about doing this the right way. So if I made this cash offer, would this work? No, absolutely not. I figured, don't worry about it. I figured, I just want to make sure. Help me understand what the why what the other offers on the MLS aren't working and why you're open to creative finance. And then is there a good reason why the seller just wouldn't turn this into a rental of their own or something along those lines? Have that discussion because it's more for them than it is for you. I promise.
yeah.
You want them to cement themselves into nothing else works. Your offer is actually the best option for me. It's actually the solution to my problem. You want to talk them through that so that they come to that conclusion instead of you telling them it's the right answer.
Yeah, especially when a lot of times the sellers they're carrying some type of risk as well if they're going through a creative financing situation.
Right.
And next thing I kind of want to get your take on, which is what are some of the biggest objections or most common objections or roadblocks that investors are running into when they're presenting a creative finance option after they've disqualified everything else that the sellers are like, maybe this doesn't work for me, right? We talked through a little bit of them a little bit earlier, right? Their credits on the line,
Yep.
different things like that. But what are some other common objections or some of the most common obstacles that you've heard yourself or investors that you've worked with kind of run into with sellers not wanting to close or just not wanting to go through with it after hearing about these options?
Number one, that's illegal. Number two, what about the due on sale clause?
Yep. And how do you handle those objections?
The that's illegal, I'll start with. They'll say it's illegal to sell the property without telling the bank, etc. It's deceptive, it's fraudulent. None of that is true. You could call it deceptive if you wanted to. We don't have a contractual duty to inform the bank. Well, any contractual duty you do have, they have a remedy for. So what we're dealing with is a civil issue, not a criminal one. And so if you and I are in a contract and I breach the contract, the contract typically has defaults and remedies. Well, guess what? A mortgage has the same thing. So if you sell the property with subject to the loan without paying off the loan, the bank didn't approve that. Okay. So if they notice and if they care, they have a remedy. You default. If they notice, if they care, they can accelerate the loan. And that is the due on sale clause. So number one actually feeds directly into number two. So we're dealing with a civil issue, not a criminal one. So it's not illegal, number one. You can just do stuff. We're asking forgiveness, not permission, basically. That's what it comes down to. There's a doctrine of efficient breach in legal terms, but I'm not an attorney. So number one, it's not illegal, which feeds into, well, then what about the due on sale clause? Because that is their contractual remedy if I default on the contract, which selling sub two is. then they can accelerate the loan. Now what? Now the whole thing's due in like 45 days. Well, that's a valid concern. It can happen. In fact, it has happened. My team has actually fixed it going on 3 dozen times now as of end of 2025. So it's overcomable, but I can't guarantee success every time, every single time it comes up. We haven't failed yet. It's usually some sort of, hey, that's part of the solution. I'm buying your rate. I'm taking over your loan because it's advantageous for me as the buyer to take over your 3 or 4% mortgage because for me it's a 7 or 8% mortgage and a lot more money down. So this is helping me. There's an economic exchange of value happening. I'm acquiring a low interest loan. You're getting your price. You're not getting the credit hit. And so long term, we have to agree to work together. So if the bank does accelerate the loan because of the due on sale clause, we have to work together to resolve that. We're going to bring in an expert who understands how to do a deed flip flop, which typically involves the deed goes back to the seller. We satisfy the bank, and then we sign additional paperwork to effect bring about the same economic effect of control and or ownership as was originally agreed, just in a format that is less noticeable or more acceptable to the bank. But it depends on what state it's in, what your short long-term plans are. So people are like, well, what's the number one solution? It depends,
Right.
but it
Right.
is resolvable.
Yeah, and that's something that I think it's very important that you shared that it is resolvable and you guys have experience resolving these issues
Mhm.
because it's something that can happen, right? It's not like, this is some kind of freak event where, the due on sale clause is only happening one out of every 10 million, situations. It's something that could potentially happen. It's a risk that you're taking on. It's a risk that the sellers are taking on as well. So knowing that there is a solution and
Yep.
also knowing that you guys are willing to put in the work to resolve these issues, I think it's very very important for an investor, also for for them to present to a seller as well, just to
Yep.
understand that to set the right expectations before moving forward.
And I would say it happens less than 1% of the time. I see this stuff, right? So my company runs 30 to 50 of these creative finance transactions every month around the country. We're helping agents get them done, buyers get them done, sellers, investors, wholesalers. So they'll bring us those deals and say, help us get it done the right way, help us understand the risks. For me, it's all about helping you make an informed decision. And so understanding that due on sale is a low risk, high impact event, that's part of you making an informed decision. Because if everything else is beautiful and that is your deal breaker, it's not a deal. It's simply not a deal. And I've got investors who are like, how can I overcome the due on sale clause risk? You can't. It's always there. There's risk mitigation, but never can you eliminate that risk entirely.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of being an investor, right? There's always going to be risk involved. It's
Yeah.
just which risk are you willing to take on?
Yep. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Just don't do a creative deal. Go back to something else. You don't have to do it this way. You do have to accept the risk.
Right, absolutely. And that's another thing I think for some investors, maybe they want to understand a little bit better, which is, the implications of having creative financing and going into and doing creative financing deals that, they're taking on maybe a little bit more risk sometimes, or maybe they're taking on different types of risks. They're
Right.
wanting to understand why they should go in there and do this, right? What are some of the benefits to an investor? Which type of investor should go in and try to do at least a little bit more creative financing than maybe just only sticking to their traditional, maybe hard money or private money solutions.
So I'm going to give you two answers. I got to preface this before I forget one. Number one, wholesalers, they'll do cash and creative, and they typically just veer to one or the other. They mixing and matching typically doesn't work very well, and I'll do more detail in a second. Number two, which I almost forgot, investors. I'll give you the fast forward. Investors who are buying creative deals along with other types of deals, you're correct. There are different risk models. There are different operation models. There's more time and involvement required for creative deals. So it's a great lower entry fee way to get into deals. It's a great way to acquire low interest debt, which is great for the long term. However, I've seen people who own a mix of creative and non-creative deals in their portfolio get to 15, 20 plus houses, and they start divesting themselves of the creative deals because they're just more complex to maintain on an ongoing basis. And the risk of the due on sale clause and the complications coming in with insurances in my name, that's the now we have to notify, we provide the insurance company to the mortgage company and they're asking questions and they always want a new clarification every year or they reject the policy. Like these sorts of little complications add up. And when you have a portfolio of 25 plus properties and five of them are creative, it's like, golly, I spend an extra 7 hours every 6 months on these deals. I'm tired of it. It's just because it's switching lanes, it's switching gears for your brain. It's just an inconsistency. So build a creative portfolio or not. But what I see people doing is they'll build a portfolio, build their cash flow. Now that they've got this stable base, they can start selling off these, either refinancing, selling them off, selling them to another investor, something along those lines. So as people grow, I see them divest or double down on creative. And then back to the wholesalers. Wholesaling is typically making cash offers, getting it under contract, and then assigning the contract to an investor buyer. That's the typical model. The same is true with creative, except you make your cash offer, then you switch to creative, or you make a creative offer. The same person who's good at making cash offers is not the same person who's good at making creative offers. Slinging the offer, yes, but you've got an involved relationship with this person. They're asking questions and they want a relationship with you. So this is a longer term, more involved, more time involved per creative deal. And so I've seen wholesale teams grow and either split into a separate entity, their creative division, because it's not the same people that work it very well. So you could have two front ends with the same back end, but operationally from the inside of the company, the cash closer does not want the long-term callbacks and relationship that somebody who's okay doing creative is.
Right. Yeah, it's a different mindset, right? I love
It
that you
is
brought that up
two
because
different speeds.
yes, because then as an investor, right, you're thinking, cash offer, you're buying it, you're done, right? You don't have to deal with the seller anymore, right? That's
Right.
it's one and done, right? You're that property is yours. Creative financing, you're cultivating more of a long-term relationship with the seller where you guys are almost kind of working together.
Whether you like it or not.
Right, exactly. Whether you like it or not, hopefully you like it, right? Because if
Yeah.
you have a long-term relationship, hopefully both parties are at least satisfied, if not happy, about the situation, and have both, of course, agreed to the risks and the responsibilities involved, and of course the benefits as well. So I think it's very
Yeah.
important that you're pointing it out in that situation where it's like you're switching gears in your brain, right? Create a financing deal. It's not like completely different, but really it's completely different than what you're used to.
It is. It is. And I had this conversation with somebody last week that I own properties in 4 different states. Getting into those deals, there were low entry deals. So I liked it because the long-term picture is really great. Low entry, it's debt pay down. One of them after property management is negative $39 a month for me, but it's a 3.625% interest rate. That's a great deal. That's a great 5, 10, 15-year deal. I'm building equity. It's basically paying for itself. And that's the one that I walked into. It cost me nothing to walk into, closing costs. So that's a deal all day, but it's in a state that's different from all the other properties I own. And so as I grow and mature, I'm like, all right, I have income coming from these properties, but the distributed management, having a different property manager for every property, this is getting old. I'd like to consolidate. And so now I'm looking at, all right, can I get rid of two of these properties and double down in one of the markets instead? That's what we see with creative, like the portfolio that grows both creative and non-creative. Eventually, you got to focus.
Yep. Exactly. And I think, what you're talking about earlier about people who are building up their portfolio, a lot of times are using creative to get into deals, right? To build up their portfolio. And then later on, as they begin to maybe get into 5, 10, 20 years or longer into their careers as an investor, they want to maybe take on less risk. Maybe they want just less headaches, right? Less relationships to maintain. That's when they start maybe, you know, changing their strategy a little bit, right? So it's always kind of like, starting a business in the beginning, it's always going to be tougher. You're hustling a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
You're finding more solutions. And then later on, as you build up more capital, you get to kind of step back a little bit and choose what you want to do.
Yeah. And you can't start out efficient. You start inefficient. You just do stuff. You get deals in. So it's not that you started wrong if you have this mix, if you have properties in multiple states. Maybe that's what was necessary for you to even get started. So do what you need to do to get going, but recognize that you're not starting with perfection. You're not starting with efficiency, and you're going to change over time and be ready and willing to accept those changes and looking for opportunities to simplify, optimize, and get efficient.
Yep, absolutely. It's like just like we talked about, right? It's like any other business that's out there, right? In the beginning, you're just trying to figure things out. You're trying to get some momentum, and then later on, that's when you can know what your niche, what your focus is really going to be moving forward as well. So wanted to, kind of get your take on your consulting company, right? So you started your consulting company because you were having some, not issues, but like you're having some challenges when it comes to putting together creative finance deals. So at this point right now with your consulting company, who are you working with the most? What does your current business look like? What did your client base look like? How are you helping and what are you guys doing for investors that can help them understand creative finance better and also help serve them so that way, they're able to get into deals and they're able to start building up their portfolio the way that they want to.
That's a really good loaded question. Thank you for that one. The So our typical client, my favorite client, is the end buyer, the person who's actually going to acquire the property. They're typically buying it from a wholesaler who got it under contract. Wholesalers are good when they focus on wholesaling. And so it's okay to have these different roles. The buyer comes in, they've got the most stake in the deal going right. And so they ask the best questions, they listen the best to the advice we've got to give and the experience we've got. So typically, an investor buyer of a creative deal is a great client for us. A wholesaler also makes a great client. So the wholesaler who's like, I was able to get this under contract, or I got a yes, and now I need help getting it under contract. Those are also great clients for us. It's a great match because we want to make sure that it's done right, that you're not making the wrong assumptions, that it's structured well, safe, legal, ethical. Every time we're looking at those three things. Also, agents who are receiving offers. I know I can add a lot of value to wholesalers, investor buyers, and particularly agents who are receiving offers because we have free 15-minute walk-in appointments. You go to the website, click a button, and you're live in my Zoom. And somebody will say, "Hey, let me put you in a breakout room, and I'll send somebody in to chat with you right now." Unless we have to reschedule because everybody's busy, we've got 14 people on a Zoom working files, and one of them can usually step away and chat with you. That's the highest value I can provide, and that's what I'm doing to raise the level of um, ethics in the industry. I want to raise the standard for what's appropriate and how to make these deals safe, legal, and ethical. And by offering the free consults to help you make sure your deal is safe, even if you don't use me, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. That's a lot of value, I think, not just for the investor buyers and also wholesalers, but specifically, I think, for agents, right? Because if you just don't understand now, maybe you've listened to this podcast, or maybe you're, learning a little bit more about creative financing and how it works and what it means, but you still are not comfortable or confident putting the deal together without any help. Now you can hop into a free 15-minute Zoom or a free 15-minute call and just say, hey, I just got a deal that came across the table. It's creative finance. What do I do? Right? I'm learning about it. I want to learn more. This is practical now. This is, I think, really valuable to a lot of
Yep.
agents because they're used to, again, their certain knowledge base or certain knowledge set. And this is something else that is coming in, and they can utilize a vendor like yourself to help their sellers and, of course, help the other party put the deal together as well.
Yep. And I've got 5-star reviews, literally only 5-star reviews from buyers, sellers, agents, wholesalers, the attorneys, title companies. I've got reviews from everybody involved in a transaction, and we've got I don't know how to say it better. We've got 240 plus 5-star reviews and only 5-star reviews.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's, just showcasing the value that you're providing to the marketplace as well. And just kind of wrap up today, I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit more about the new venture, right, that you were
Mm-hmm.
talking about earlier in the show as well, the title company you guys just
Mm-hmm.
put together. What came about putting together a title company and how are you guys differentiating from, the traditional title companies out there?
So I wanted to do this for a long time because I've been so involved in the transactions that I've wanted to start one, but I needed to delegate rather than abdicate. So building a management team in the first company at Creative TC was critical before I could go do the next one. Incidentally, it's also Creative TC because we have Transaction Consulting TC and we have Title Company TC. So it's also Creative TC, but it's a separate LLC. So we're in Colorado. I will expand to more states later, but we just raised $320,000 of capital as a startup fund. Um, Man, I'm just so excited about this whole thing. And what sets us different is that go get a license and you can be a title company. Buy the software and you're a title company. Anybody can do it. And that's kind of the problem is it's not hard to get licensed. So average is average. And I don't feel that people focus on the customer experience, and I obsess over the customer experience. So I want to deliver uncommon competence. We understand buyers, sellers, wholesalers, agents, brokers, we understand and lenders. We understand your different roles and your aligned needs and wants and your conflicting needs and wants, and we can navigate that with and for you to get the deal across the finish line.
Yeah. So you guys are able to service anybody pretty much when it comes to a transaction.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, we're not focused on commercial deals, but
right.
I'm sure we'll open up a commercial division. But my current focus is investors buying real estate, creative or non-creative. It's called Creative Title Company, though.
Yeah. And I think that's where, where you differentiate yourself from like a traditional title company that
Yeah,
maybe has no experience doing any of this because
right.
now they're like, what do we do? Maybe they go to
Yeah,
you for the consulting, right?
I do have people referring business to me. I have competitors referring business to me when it's above their level or if it's outside their buy box for business. And I've got good relationships with other title companies who just don't want to deal with creative, and that's fine by me. It to me, it's like I'm going to train and be able to perform at this level, and creative finance is the most complex, most moving parts, etc. So if I can do this with 5 stars, then why wouldn't I be able to also do all of this stuff?
Yep, absolutely. So, Caleb, man, I just want to say thank you for taking some time today, joining us, sharing your value with us. I think a lot of people learned a lot more today from this episode, just sitting here listening to this conversation, and I definitely did as well. So, for anybody out there who wants to learn a little bit more about your services, maybe they want to get in touch with you, maybe they're just an agent or an investor that's learning a little bit more about creative finance and they have questions, what are some of the best ways for people to reach out to you or just stay connected with you over time?
Number one, calebchristopher.io. That links to all the businesses that I own. I also publish a monthly newsletter where I give my real financials, profits and losses for consulting, title, and my real estate portfolio. Sometimes we're lossy, and I'll explain why. And it's like there's no guru talk. So that's my favorite part about that, growing that list there. And then so you'll find Creative TC, which is creativetc.io, and you'll find Creative Title, which is creativetitle.io. So should be pretty consistent. The free consults are at creativetc.io.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to leave links in the description, the show notes down below, so that way it's easy for you guys to find. But other than that, man, Caleb, just want to say thank you again for being on the show. Before we let you go, is there any last pieces of advice, any last tips, nuggets you want to just leave with us?
It's okay to say, I don't know, but I know a guy.
Absolutely. Caleb, thanks so much for being on the show. Appreciate you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show. Take care.